mention that whenever you play Brig Zen, it's really important that Brig is actually in front of Zenyatta, because that way if someone jumps in, Brig can flail them, bash them, and whatnot. It also gives a shield for Zenyatta, and normally that Brig has armor is on top of the shield, so it's just better. That's not a lot. A lot of times when I'm coaching, I see Zen in front of Brig, and I'm like, that's really weird. That's just not good. You're gonna get jumped on, or you're gonna take a lot of poke damage, and you can't really stabilize very well. Okay, so this is a video I think that is very needed for a lot of people. A lot of backlines I work with struggle with actually understanding how to take space, how to position, what's the difference between walking forward and like taking angles and sort of like taking an angle and walking forward, their heal resources, how to position, um, living from enemy ultimates. That's a really big one. I think I even see that in contenders. People don't understand how to live like through ultimates correctly. So I'm gonna try and tackle all these topics. Essentially, basically the topics are like who's your backline, general positioning options, important communications, heal resources, different ways to engage, living engages, and if there's time, I'll talk about reticks. Okay, so I'll just dig into it. I'm gonna try and go semi-fast, just so the video is not too long and it's just got a lot of good content. So what's considered your backline? So we're mainly talking about ball comp here, ball tracer, but I'm trying to put this in a way where that you can hopefully relate it to if you're playing Brigana, or you're playing any type of like Brigana based composition, because your backline's still going to be somewhat similar. There's a slight difference between Zen and Ana, but I'm just trying to say in general this is how you can sort of approach it, but mainly focusing on ball tracer. So what's considered your backline is off tank, main support. Well, I don't know where the racer is. There we go. Wrong thing. Off tank, Hitscan, main support. This actually writes really smoothly. And the different off tank options normally are Sigma, Diva, sometimes Zarya. Very rarely these days. And then hit scan options, Ashe, McCree, you want to brawl more, maybe Hanzo. And then obviously you could also run like more spam based stuff. You run Tracer, Echo, and stuff like that. But those are like the hit scan options I'm sort of like going to go into. And then main support options, Brig Mercy. And flex support options are Zen, essentially. Yes, you're playing the Brigana, then you'll have, Ana. So these are sort of like your general backline for the ball comp. Let's keep going now. Oh, in general sense, you normally play Sigma on more longer based maps if the enemy team is playing double shield, as they have double shield. Having your own shield is really nice to reduce uptime and also allow your Zen to like farm more and take angles and hold space better. Also, Diva sort of sucks into double shield to some extent, unless you can actually like utilize verticality. Diva is really good into like Winston and ball compositions because you can just essentially blow up ball, you can blow up Winston, and you can essentially peel from enemy flankers like Tracer, Sombra, and stuff like that. Zarya's not really played that much anymore. Alright, cool. And then I'll say Mercy's like more spam variation, Brig's more brawl variation. In a very simple way, you can go in more in depth and go into it, but that's sort of understanding, what you do there. That. Alright, so now I'll sort of go into general positioning, and we're sort of going to look at this to sort of explain general positioning. And I think this is one of like a topic that I don't think many people fully actually understand. So in general, we talked that you have these heroes. Here we'll have Sigma, we'll have, let's say, Brig, we'll have Zen, and we'll have Ashe. Now, when you're playing against most compositions, whether it's Ball, Mirror, or even Winston comp, you normally don't want any of these guys stacked together. Why? Because if enemy Winston jumps on you, then the Winston's going to cleave on all four of them, and that's sort of pointless because the Winston's denying all of them. Then Ball slams, denies all four of them, same problem. So normally you sort of want to try and split people up. So if you put a Sigma over here, we'll sort of hypothetically say maybe the Ball's over here and the Tracer's like somewhere below, or like on this pathing, can't really drop, like near the mini essentially. And let's say your Brig then are here, then maybe you have your Ashe play another angle, or preferably play over here. Now in this situation, your Ashe is what I like to call someone who's roaming, because the Ashe can sort of move based off what they're feeling and the angle they want to take. They can go harder on a harder off angle. They can play further back based if the enemy team has an Echo or Pharah. They can play Yeah, so they can essentially play like further back if their team is an Echo Pharaoh. They can play more wider if they know that they need to be in a certain position in which that they can pressure Winston, so Winston isn't actually able to jump forward. So, for instance, like if they play over here, if an Echo goes for like here, then they can crossfire. Also, as well as if a Winston tries to walk up on them, it's going to be very rough. So he can constantly doink the Winston, so Winston's not able to close distance very easily. But the other basic reason for this is the fact that if an enemy Winston jumps on your backline, then your Ash can try and peel them. And if an enemy Winston tries to jump on your Ash, your backline can peel them. So it's sort of a very general concept of sort of how that works. Now, let's say you didn't have, um, say you didn't have a Sigma. Let's say now you have a Diva. How does this change? Well, your Ash can still roam. The biggest difference that's going to happen now is that your Diva is, the way I look at it very simply, is your Diva is almost always in the middle of like between like your ball tracer, like in between them, and your backline. So that your Diva can help your front line and Diva can also peel your backline. And I'll go a little bit more into Diva's like kit a little bit later as we're talking about backline. But just as a general understanding is that like your Diva needs to be in the middle and needs to be able to help and peel. Then let's say you're running a different composition for backline now. Let's say you're playing a Mercy. Now in this situation, what you could do is you could do something like Ash Mercy, and then maybe like Sigma Zen. Now you would do this maybe if the enemy team is on like double shield and have no flankers. Otherwise, you know, your Zen would just get jumped on by like a ball tracer and just die. But this way, you're sort of have like you're amplifying your angles and getting more value out of your angles because your Mercy is damage boosting your Ash and your Zen, Sigma Zen, and it's like really strong together. And then your ball tracer will also play together, and then they'll hit from another angle, so you get 3 angles of aggression, which is strong, and you can essentially web the enemy team. But more than that, again, understand that the wider you go with this, like the more distance you have in between these people, the essentially the worse it's gonna be in terms of peeling for each other because Mercy has to fly in distance. Um, and the other thing to also think about is this is when you've got point control. If you're retaking, you normally want to sort of stack together. So Sigma Zen, Ash, Mercy stack together, retaking, and then late in the mid fight sort of split off. So I'm gonna actually delete all of this, but like you'd stack together here. Okay. There we go. Let's to make this smaller. There we go. So you would like sort of like stack together, and then maybe your Mercy Ash would maybe move over here, and then your Sigma Zen would maybe play over here, and then your Sigma Zen could push here, or they could even go wide, and then your Mercy Ash could maybe go something like this, something along those lines. It depends again how many flankers there are, because if they have Tracer, Sombra, or Ball, then you don't really want these guys to split because it's really risky. And then also just running a Mercy Zen. Sigma Ash into like a ball tracer is just really greedy because you have very little peel. There's no Diva to peel. You don't have a Brig. You normally want a Brig or Diva to sort of help dealing with peel. It's when the enemy team has a lot of flankers like ball, tracer, Sombra, even like a soldier off angling or an Echo to some extent. Okay. And the other example I'll sort of give as well is that if you were to run a Diva now without a Sigma, it would sort of look a little similar, but also a little different. So what now it would happen is you would like you essentially maybe have your Diva over here, and then maybe you'd have your, let's say your, it's not the best map to show this, but something like this, Echo, Mercy, Zen, and then your Echo would sort of essentially position in a way where that your Mercy is attached to your Echo, but your Mercy can also peel your Zen if needed. This way, your Diva can still peel your Zen, obviously, but it's a little bit easier for your Diva because your Mercy can peel too. Okay, so those are sort of the different like positions I'd sort of say. I think what's really important to understand is the value of being split and not together. The biggest thing from that is the angles, how aggressively you're split in terms of the angle and the distance to understand how to support each other. So now let's go into a little bit more into like the role a little bit. So we talked about Ash and how Ash sort of off angles. Let me see if there's anything I missed with this. So if Ash is off angling here, um, it's really important that you actually have an idea of where you want to go. So if the enemy Winston does jump on you, then you should have an idea of where you want to coach gun to, preferably maybe over here, and then your backline can just help you. So sort of just make sure that you're saving the CDs you need to live, so that you don't die instantly. And then now the other thing for Diva, which I think is a little important, and I'm not going to go too much into this. I think I'm going to draw it out over here. So we sort of already talked about Diva's like positioning, how we want Diva to sort of be like in the middle. But something else that I think people don't really understand is that when you have a Brig and you have a Zen, is Brig's Inspire is like massive, like it's quite big. 20 meters, I believe. It's flail distance. So because of that, your diva can like posture more forward. If your diva wants to play more aggressive, or if the enemy team has like dive tanks, for instance, like maybe they have like a Winston over here, and your diva can now posture up here because your diva now can like get passive inspire from your brig and hold more aggressive space. It's harder for an enemy Winston to actually go up. And now because your diva's here, your diva can peel back and go more up to with your Winston while your diva is also holding space. Your diva can even hold angles. Imagine your diva like playing something like over here, and holding a more aggressive angle instead of being like a little bit more passive angle. But something to keep in mind is that this is a more of an aggressive position, which means you're helping more of your front line, but you're not peeling as much. If the enemy team has like, again, Tracer, Sombra, Ball, Diva, you might want to be in a more like passive position where you can sort of like help, your backline and also deny maybe the enemy flankers that are trying to rotate instead of trying to pressure their front line. So sort of understand that you can position more forward and take angles, or you can sort of position a bit more further back, to help your backline and also sort of like pressure the flankers. And while you're pressuring the flankers, keep in mind that you're helping. So like if their tracers over, whoops, if there are tracers over here, your tracer could be over like here too, for instance, let's say, and that's a terrible color. So let's use this. Tracers over here, and you guys are sort of fighting each other. Your diva can sort of DM and help like your tracer win. And this is just an example of like diva sort of like helping your backline in a position to help your backline, but also in a position that might be also be able to help like your flankers win a duel with lane control. So very simply, understand your diva can posture forward. That's going to be more aggressive on pressuring their tanks, but it's risky because if the enemy team has a lot of flankers, they can pressure your backline. Your diva can still fly back, but it takes time. Diva can also position further back to help your backline and to peel them harder and help your flankers too. Or your diva can sort of also position in the middle, like something maybe over here. It's not the best example, but something over here. And I don't want to confuse and say that like if your diva's in the back line, like they're also helping your flankers. That's just what works in this situation. That may not always happen. So like it's like front line, it's like back line, and then maybe there's like there's the middle, right, where you're sort of like also helping your flankers. And based off your positioning, you might be able to do multiple of these things. Um, and that's why I sort of said you normally want to put diva in the middle so diva can sort of have the options. And then basically just understand if you have a Mercy Zen, you need to peel more. Especially if you have Mercy Zen and they have a lot of enemy teams, a lot of flankers, please peel. Don't be aggressive. You do not want your Mercy dying a lot. Not your Mercy, your Zen dying. That's not good. Essentially you want the ball tracer to go on your Zen and then you to peel your Zen and then the enemy ball like getting discorded and like not actually blowing up but like getting really low and maybe dying. That would be ideal. I'm gonna just do good, cool, just clear. Okay. Well, cool. Let's move into comms now. So that sort of talked a little bit about, the actual Diva. I'm also Diva and Ash. I'm also going to mention that whenever you play Brig Zen, it's really important that Brig is actually in front of Zenyatta, because that way if someone jumps in, Brig can flail them, bash them, and whatnot. It also gives a shield for Zenyatta, and normally that Brig has armor is on top of the shield, so it's just better. Not that's not a lot. A lot of times when I'm coaching, I see Zen in front of Raid. I'm like, that's really weird. That's just not good. You're gonna get jumped on, or you're gonna take a lot of poke damage, and you can't really stabilize very well. So just make sure as Brig, you're always in front. And this is also really beneficial because as when we talk later about like communication, which we will in a second, like you'll understand that like as Zen, you can sort of just like follow your Brig, or Brig and Zen can say I want to go this way, and then Brig can just go that way, and you'll sort of like follow each other. And it's very nice as well because whenever you can't orb your tracer, when we talk about heal resources, you can always orb your Brig, and because you guys are almost always stacked, you'll always have that orb on Brig, so and it won't go off because you're always in LOS of each other. So it's good for orb uptime. All right, so I want to quickly talk about like communication really fast. So comms. I'm not gonna go too much into this. Along like before when like double bubble was a thing, and you saw like Zarya, Brig, Ana, and stuff like that. I used to like say that Zarya can be really vocal and sort of call the rotations because Zarya is sort of the mid-fight brawler. But because Zarya's not run as much anymore, and you're looking at most of the off tanks being Sigma and Diva, both these off tanks don't necessarily stack on the backline. Hence, you don't really want them dictating where the backline rotates to or how they move. So it's probably better if preferably one of your Brig or Zen is a bit more vocal on the rotations. And essentially the rotation calls is something like very simple. It's saying like, hey, I want to move forward, I want to move to the right, I want to push left, I want to push back. If they jump on me, I want to kite here, like stuff like that. So they're on the same page. So they're constantly like doing their own thing. And in terms of other things besides like actual rotation calls, and like I said, it can be either one of them. I personally think it's better for Brig because Brig is in front and Brig can just move and Zen can follow. Brig can also say I want to brawl and Zen just gives orb to Brig and then Brig just goes and brawls. It's not that hard. But sometimes Zens like to dictate stuff as well because they are like sort of like the range damage dealer, and sometimes they'll see angles that they want to push or like angles or sort of angles essentially they want to like push right to or left to, and they'll eventually want to like push that. So, and if you have an open comm system, you can maybe try both calling, but the fact of the matter is like that can get a little confusing and conflicted. There needs to be a lot of trust. So sometimes just having one person doing it and then one person listening is sort of just easier. Some basic CD calls too. I'm not gonna go too much into this, but Brig just essentially saying when you're when you have low packs, when you have no packs, who you're packing. You can say like Echo Pack, Tracer Pack, Zen Pack, stuff like that, just so they know they have an extra pack and they can keep being aggressive. Zen saying the same thing about Orb, so sort of just saying like Brig, you have Orb, so Brig knows to be aggro, or Tracer, you have Orb, so Tracer knows that they can get away with more, because especially with Tracer's like UI, it's very hard to notice if you've got Orb or not. So sort of just calling like Orb, who Orb. And then for alts, all I'm going to say about alts is just be vocal about how you want to use it. Please don't stack Rally and Trance. They're like insanely strong ultimates that can be used to alt trade for enemy team ultimates, or better yet, they can be used in mid fight to dictate aggression and keep going. So just say like, hey, I want to hold really close and rally and push in them, right? Or something along those lines. Or you can say like, if they flux, I'll trance, and then we'll push in with a trance after the flux. And then if we need rally, we can rally too. Like so something like that. You can use if statements. um, you can sort of approach it however you want. Just make sure it's sort of clear about how you guys are doing it. Okay, let's move into heal resources. Again, this is something that's pretty basic, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Essentially, ball comp, as most people know, is sort of like broken into like a dive slash spam, and then there's some type of transition into a brawl, depending on what you're running. So I'll be breaking them down sort of based off these type of things. So if you're in a dive slash spam with Zen, what to do, and then I'll also do with Brig if you're in a dive spam, what to do first. So if you're in a dive spam, essentially normally you want to be giving your orbs to flankers. That's like your first priority. And obviously, if someone pressures your Brig, then you should immediately give it to your Brig. Like, they're like Winston's jumping or balls hitting, then you need to prioritize your Brig because you need to keep your Brig up. Because if your Brig's alive, Spire procs, and again, range is really big. But another thing that a lot of people don't actually understand, and it's a little high level, so that's why I don't like necessarily teach it, is if you know that your flanker doesn't need the orb and your Brig doesn't need the orb and your ball is sort of rotating, you can just throw orb on ball just to help him give a little extra heals, so that yes, he's playing health packs, yes, he's playing good pathing, but that extra heals will help him a lot get that armor. Plus, it's also good for your alt build up, and then you can immediately just put it back on your Tracer, Echo, or maybe your Brig. So sort of the way I look at this is essentially flankers, then it's like ball if he really needs it, and then Brig if the enemy team is pushing. Whoops, Brig. Yikes. And then for Brig, if you're in dive spam, right, the very simple priority is always your Zen, because if your Zen dies again, you're in trouble. So you need to make sure you save one pack for your Zen, one pack for flanker, and then another pack for your tanks if needed, or someone else. And the way I'm gonna like also mention this too is I'm not going too much into like, as Zen, you need to orb your Tracer and Brig, you need to pack your Echo, or maybe you need both of you put all your resources into your Echo and win. It really depends on the type of playstyle you guys choose. Different teams will use different heal resources different ways with their DPS to give them more value, or play for different people differently, or into different matchups. So I'm sort of keeping it loose in that sense, so you guys can sort of choose how you want to approach it. Just make sure your team sort of knows, so the DPS know what resources they're getting. Now, so this is dive spam. Now we go into sort of a transition period where you're brawling. Now, where you're brawling, it's honestly straight up your Brig needs orb. Yeah, because your Brig is essentially going to be the one taking most of the damage, so your Brig needs orb. There's no real question about it. And then when your Brig is brawling, then essentially what you want to look to do is you want to make sure you have one or pack for your Zen in case they get jumped while you're walking. Obviously, yes, your Zen has, Inspire, but still. You need to actually pack your tanks more because your tanks are going to actually take more damage. So the ones like pushing into the enemy team and taking aggression. Your DPS should be in your Inspire range, so that's good. And then obviously after tanks is your DPS if they need it. But if your DPS are playing angles correctly and corners correctly, and in your Inspire they're getting passively healed, they should be good.